to fix the Orioles. This guy is doing an Orioles podcast these days. He's a longtime baseball historian, editor, author, and brings on folks who write books about baseball. You can follow him. He's a frequent visitor here as well at J. McGuire MLB with 2 beers out there, and I'm going to need 2 beers for every night that I have to watch the Orioles play. He is Justin McGuire. We welcome him back. He is a podcast host as well as a baseball book pod and J. McGuire MLB in the fantastic Pie Trainer card on the top, or the T205 set there, I think, or T206. I'm not sure. I'll look my baseball card history up. Dude, they're in last place. I know they're calling it 5th place around here. I know you opine on it daily. I know your roots with Oriole baseball and your long-sufferingness that I share. I've never seen it quite like this, and there's so many things to pick holes on, but I guess the question is, what is the prescription here? And it all really begins with who's making the decisions around here. Right, Justin?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the problem, Nestor. I mean, we've talked about this a million times, but the Orioles are facing, franchise-defining decisions over the next few months. They're going to have to decide, who to trade Manny Machado to, what to get for him, if they're going to trade Adam Jones, if they're going to bring Buck Showalter back, all sorts of things like that that are going to define this team for the next several years at least. And we don't know who's making the decisions in the warehouse. It's like you said. I mean, ostensibly Dan Duquette's in charge, but everything we've heard is that Brady Anderson made all the decisions in the offseason. Dan Duquette's contract's up at the end of the year. Buck Showalter's contract's up at the end of the year. It makes no sense for this team to have these guys in a lame duck situation while they have all these big decisions to be made. I just don't understand how they've let it come to this.
And what's the point of the front of it? You know what I mean? Like, what good is it having Duquette having an office down the hallway and you're paying him? I mean, but that's the Peter way. What good was it having Duquette around to begin with? I mean, Flanagan extolled the horror stories to me of, what happened the day after he got fired and where he was. And, and we all know the ending to that story, although we're not allowed to talk about that because it wouldn't be polite. But they got to own that too. I mean, everything that's happened in this organization has now added up again, including not winning, including Buck not putting Britton in the game, including the $130 million that Chris Davis has, including all the lame duck, including all the mismanagement, including all the mistreatment of people like me and many, many other people that have got the tire tread down our backside, that when the team starts 8 and whatever they're going to start and completely is irrelevant and still looks to be literally rudderless, leaderless, clueless. They've done nothing but destroy goodwill throughout the community for 2.5 decades, and I don't know where the rocket ship is that's going to come in and save this thing, or what person is going to be charged at the top of the pyramid with making the place better from a baseball and a business and a community and from every standpoint of making people feel, quite frankly, and I know you're accustomed to this, that 1988 stuff that MLB did last week with Terry Kennedy and Fred Lynn and, the fantastic fans night that really happened here, not only will that never happen again, but it wouldn't happen in Baltimore again, certainly not for this baseball team, because that team had a family feel for the community that's just gone, that this organization has killed. And they're going to have to build this back up person by person, brick by brick, local business by local business in order to get people to come back to the ballpark. But even on the inside, there has to be, on the baseball side, someone of competence doing this and instilling some sort of confidence that this can be the Houston Astros turnaround or whatever you wanted, rebuilding or whatever it is. Nobody's even owning this, man. And that was really the problem with the Peter era all the way around, is nobody ever stood up in front and looked like they were in charge, really.
Yeah, I mean, and the few times that you did have somebody who looked like they're in charge are the few times that they've had success. When you had Pat Gillick in the 90s, they had some success there. You had a veteran baseball guy running things, but again, he was run off pretty quickly, just as Davey Johnson was. By the ownership that is the same ownership they have now. So, yeah, you can do the math. You can see when they have had competent baseball people around, they haven't lasted very long for the most part.
Well, even McPhail.
McPhail did some good things,
Yeah, in the end, and he doesn't really get any credit for it. He probably should, but, Flanagan killed himself, and 30 days later, McPhail was gone, and no one ever asked why. I still have never seen anybody in Philadelphia even No one knows why. He just sort of went away. But he was a competent one, you know what I mean? Like, amidst all of these people that ran the place, the only thing good that's ever happened here, in my opinion, was McPhail. McPhail was, if that didn't happen, if Andy didn't go fight with Peter back during, on the same side of the labor dispute, and they became linked in some way, there was nobody else that would have come in here to be able to run the place the way Andy did for that period of time, to create Adam Jones and Chris Tillman and Davis and Machado and all of the good things that happened in the aftermath of that.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, his fingerprints are on most of the key decisions that were made that led to the success of 2012 to 2016 for sure. And I mean, I think Dan Duquette did some positive things for sure, especially in the smaller term deals. The bringing in the retreads who kind of gave them some value for a short time and that kind of thing. He was pretty good at that. I think the key though right now is, I mean, we could sit here and talk about the lack of leadership all we want to, but I think the key right now is to say what needs to happen going forward. And I think that's the big question, is what is going to happen. And I think most people who are being rational about it look at it and say a complete teardown and rebuild is what's needed. You need to trade Manny Machado and get whatever, prospects you can get for him, but don't hold out for an unreasonable amount of prospects. You know what I mean? You're only giving a half a season to the guy. You're not going to get the greatest deal in the world. You could possibly get a couple of top-ranked guys and some, middle-tier prospects, and that's going to have to be enough. You can't hold out for what they were holding out for apparently last offseason. You're not going to get much for Adam Jones. You may not get much for Zach Britton unless he comes back and is very effective. They need to think about trading a guy like Richard Blyer, who suddenly has some value, and I think a contender could really use an effective reliever like that. They need to just really anybody has to be on the market at this point, as far as I'm concerned. And they need to get prospects back. They need to build the farm system back up. They need to get into international scouting and international development, which they've philosophically said they don't want to do. But if you're going to compete in the major leagues, you have to do that. They've got to do all those things, and they've got to just buck themselves up for the idea that you're going to have several years where you're not very good. I mean, at this point, they're going to be bad for the next few years anyway. So it's a question of whether they're bad in a planned rebuild, or they're just bad because they don't know what they're doing. And that's what I'm afraid of, is that they're not going to actually commit to anything and just sort of flounder around like they've been doing. But this, we've seen it with the Cubs, we've seen it with the Astros. I mean, you're starting to see it with the Braves now. If you commit to a plan, you put it in place, and you make the right decisions, eventually you're going to see a payoff for it, but you have to be patient. You have to be patient, and that's the one thing that this ownership has never been good at, is saying we're just going to have to be patient and live with the fact that we're going to suck for a few years, and realize that at the end of that we could come up with a very good team. But until they're willing to do that, it's just going to be more floundering and making decisions on the fly, which is what they've been doing for the past, at least 10 years, probably longer.
Well, the hardest part is, and, it's not like Brady Anderson would ever have a press conference, because if he was ever going to have one, he would have had one already, right? And if they were ever going to be forthright about what the plan is, or what is honestly going on with the old man, or what is honestly going... They don't know how to be honest, man. I've been around this for 25 years. There's never been a shred of honesty, and quite frankly, at the times when they've come out onto the front, you almost can't trust them. This is an organization that played a baseball game with tanks circling the stadium and told the fans not to come, and then somehow they thought it was a good idea. And then 4 years later, when nobody's coming to the games, it really is maddening and infuriating. But, aside from that, when they did put McPhail out in front, there was this, he's been doing this and his dad did this. I mean, hell, the guy invented collusion. He must be a bright guy. We thought all of that. They don't even have anybody they put out in front of this thing anymore. Duquette sort of has stopped doing that, and he inspires no one. Everyone knew he wanted the Toronto job a couple of years ago, and I think that sort of undermined a lot of his credibility with the fans, as well as the bad teams. And the no spending in the offseason that gets blamed on him. But I've never blamed him for anything. You know, I mean, here's a guy in the Cape Cod League looking to get back into the sport. They brought him in. You know, he benefited from a lot of decisions that were made before he got there. He made a couple of his own that were pretty good. And now we're at the end of this thing, and he wants to try to go back and get a job in a real place, and I can't blame him for that. But I don't know who they could prop up other than Buck at this point, who's already in the family, that could, to some degree, win consumer confidence here, right? Like Buck's holding the funeral before and after every game, you know, these days. So he is out in front of it. If they put a suit on him and say he's running the place and Brady's going to be his assistant or whatever. And I mean, look, they sold the two-headed monster twice to us 15 years ago, right? So I just don't know where the intellect is for John Angelos and Lou Angelos and Mama Angelos, that their decisions are going to be different than the old man, but really not without, you know, the same sort of lacking of credibility and lacking of any expertise or intelligence or instinct for this. You know, all these years into this, they've shown me nothing over 25 years that they could be good at this, right? We know the old man wasn't good at this. It's not easy to be good at this, especially not when you're drawing like the Montreal Expos right now.
Right. Well, I mean, again, if it were up to me, and I can't speak to what they're going to do because, like you said, they're not transparent at all. This is not a team that signals what they're planning or what they're doing.
We use the word unorthodox here, Just. You know, we go unorthodox. That's what they are.
I will say this, though. If it were up to me, if it were my team and my money, I would probably clean house from top to bottom, and that means I would not be handing this team over to Brady Anderson. I would not be handing it over to Buck Showalter.
But he's best friends with the owner's son, so that's not, you know what I mean? Like, I hate to interject into that, but that's kind of where we are. You know what I mean? It's like, let Kushner run the place. Yeah, he'll keep the secrets. He won't talk to anybody. Well, not talking to anybody for 25 years has led to this, quite frankly.
Right. Well, maybe we'll put Ivanka in charge, and we'll see what happens with that. But
that is possible. You never know. I mean, I've been told by more people than I care to count that Mrs. Angelos is really running the place right now. That if she wants something done, it is done. So she might as well be Ivanka or Melania, quite frankly, at this point.
Well, as I said, I can't speak to what's actually going on there any better than anybody else. But like I said, if it were up to me, I would look at the organizations that have been successful, you know, the Astros and the Cubs, or a team that's had long-term success like the Cardinals, and look at that organization and find somebody, you know, in the middle level of management there who maybe is ready to take that next step and bring them in. I mean, Theo Epstein was 29 or something when he took over the Red Sox. You know, if you find a good, young, competent guy who understands how baseball works in 2018. And have them, you know, decide who their manager is going to be, have them decide how they're going to approach the draft, have them decide how they're going to approach trading players. And then maybe at the end of it, you have what the Astros had or the Cubs had. And even if you don't have that, at least you have a competitive team. Maybe it doesn't result in a World Series victory, but it's most likely going to result in a team that can win games and compete for postseason spots fairly regularly. And that's what it just baffles me why they don't do that. I don't understand. I just don't understand how this team is run, and I never have.
Well, in the time we've been on the phone, and I don't like giving away, you know, on the radio the conversations we had, but when you and I began the conversation, it was 0-0. We've now been on the line 13 minutes. The Orioles are already losing 7-0, and they've managed to wreck Dylan Bundy. So, Bundy would be the only reason to come to the ballpark right now. Maybe Trey Mancini if you're buying in. Certainly Scope being back in the lineup on Tuesday night. That's nice and all that. But it would be a lot nicer for me if they had Scope under contract. And, I began talking to you and Luke and other astute baseball people about that we're no closer to that. The Santanders in the lineups and the Caleb Josephs and the Chris Davis thing. The backdrop for all of this is having to give him $130 million. That's going to linger longer because they're not going to just throw it. They're going to give him at bats and keep putting him in the lineup because they owe him $130 million.
Yeah, it's one of the most incomprehensible decisions I've ever seen by any baseball team. I mean, it just, at the time, it didn't make sense. I've seen some people on Twitter arguing about this, saying, well, nobody thought this was a bad deal at the time. And I'm like, are you kidding? I knew it was a bad deal at the time. Everybody knew it was a bad deal at the time. Nobody else was offering Chris Davis anything like 7 years. It never made any sense. and he's deteriorated even more quickly than I think we thought he was going to. I thought he might at least be a 30 homer guy for a few more years, but he's not even replacement level at this point. I mean, the guy can't hit, and that's the problem. The Orioles, other than shortstop, they're basically below average at every position. And they can't score runs, and then I'm not watching the game because I'm on the phone with you, but we now have a third straight disaster start from Dylan Bundy, which is really, really depressing because he was one of the few bright spots on this team until about a week ago or 10 days ago. So I don't know. It's really, really a hard time to be an Orioles fan right now.
It is now what in that case? Justin McGuire is joining us here. He is Jay McGuire, MLB, out on Twitter when the Orioles lose or win or anywhere. And, this is where if you're a baseball fan like you and me, and you would prefer to be watching the Orioles on a beautiful, starlit night with 38,000 of you and your friends at Camden Yards, and something magic happens, and all. But instead, we are, and I've got the Capitals to keep me company for at least a couple more weeks here, and, we got the Lamar Jackson, Joe Flacco thing, but behind all of this, being a baseball fan, is we're watching the Yankees and Red Sox do some otherworldly stuff that may have been predicted. Obviously, the Central Division, and we're seeing a little bit of that with the Royals right now, has been a mess. But it is a fascinating year for baseball, right? I mean, even though we're not in this race, it's a pretty good year from the Angels, Astros standpoint, and this kid Ohtani, and some teams getting up a little bit, like the Phillies have been revived a little bit. I think the Milwaukee Brewers, even the Pirates have gotten off to a good start. The Cubs are sort of back to earth after we thought they were going to win 10 World Series in a row 18 months ago. Right? Pearl Jam thought that too, but there are great stories everywhere here in baseball. We're not participating in it, but it is going to be fun to sort of watch this Red Sox-Yankees thing from hey, they're two pretty good baseball teams perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're both very good, and, I expect that they're going to compete for that division title right down to the wire, although I do think there's a possibility that the Yankees at some point kind of run away with it. But I think, the Red Sox are certainly good enough that could be a competitive race all year. And I go back and forth with this. I mean, is it good for baseball to have that rivalry be top of everyone's mind again? Probably it is. Probably it's good for baseball to have those two be, two of the best teams in baseball. It's been a while since that's been the case. But again, Ohtani is a great story. I mean, Mike Trout, my goodness. I mean, Mike Trout's having a better year than he's ever had, and that's saying a whole lot. Bryce Harper. We see stars all around baseball. There are a lot of good things going on, and unfortunately, Baltimore is not going to be participating in any of them.
Tell everybody about your podcast and what you do in trying to fix the Orioles. We're all trying to fix the Orioles here, Justin, but I know you've been hard at work with an Oriole podcast and also bringing a lot of folks onto your podcast as well and all the things that you're doing out there because you love baseball the way we love baseball.
Yeah, I have a couple of podcasts, but for the people listening to this one, the one they might be most interested in is called Locked on Orioles, and it's a daily or near daily podcast, 4 to 5 times a week usually. It's a fairly short, it's usually 15 to 20 minutes, and we just talk about some topic in the Orioles world. A lot of it, obviously, lately has been about what the heck is wrong with this team or who are they're going to get from Manny Machado. It's gotten a little depressing, honestly, but it's, if you're a fan, we're talking about the team in a very granular manner. We're talking about a lot of Orioles stuff, so if you're a fan, it's pretty interesting, I think. And we try to look at some other stuff, too, some Orioles history and things like that as well. So, people should check that out. It's Locked on Orioles, and you can find it wherever podcasts are available.
All right, man, keep the faith. We're going to have plenty to discuss, though, right? As Oriole fans, even though the things happening on the field will somehow seem less relevant, to your point, monumental things are going to be happening over the next 90 days from the draft, from the Machado thing, from how all of these guys handle this, including now Dylan Bundy, who's falling down the mountain, Cobb getting all this money, and Cobb's used to losing, right? I mean, he's been at Tampa for a period of time. So, some of these guys like Adam Jones, they're not familiar with this, right? Like Machado's not familiar with fifth place as they call it on Masson.
Yeah, it's true. Most of the guys in the team, at least the ones who've been around for a while, they're used to being at least pretty good. Even last year, I mean, they fell apart in September, but they were they were a competent team for much of the year at least. And, this is just, this is a whole new thing. This is something that we haven't seen in 30 years, a team this bad.
Well, I have memories of '88 because I'm old enough, and it brought back the sad memories of what's happened to the franchise, not the team on the field. But if anybody hasn't seen that '88 retrospective MLB did, I shared that out on Twitter. And we'll share out Justin McGuire, J. McGuire, MLB, and all of his great work out on Twitter and on the internet, following baseball and the Orioles and Baseball Book Pod and Locked On Orioles. Always good to visit you, and I must say, as an aside, because I like to mix up my conversations, I've had a couple friends come to your new homeland of Asheville, North Carolina, and have told me they've been in love with it. So I can see why you've settled down there based on what everybody tells me. They go there and they fall in love with the place, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great area. It's in the mountains, obviously, so it's beautiful country. There's a lot of hiking, a lot of outdoor stuff if you're into that.
And beer.
A lot of breweries, in Hendersonville, Asheville. There's just there's a lot of microbrewers. So if you're into that kind of thing, you could do you could do several days of tours and ciders, too, hard ciders, because this is apple country here. So
save me a stout. That's my thing. I'm a stout guy, malty by nature, I think. But hey, always a pleasure to visit with you, man. And keep up the good work on the podcast. We shall live to see the Orioles climb. This maybe not. I don't want to say I've given up hope, but I've given up some level of optimism.
I'm going to say that I expect the Orioles to be back in the World Series in my lifetime. Now that's maybe when I'm 80, but
well, we're all going to live a long, healthy life here, right?
Exactly.
Appreciate you, Justin. Thanks for coming on, man.
All right, no
Justin McGuire, J. McGuire, MLB, out on Twitter, as well as at Locked On Orioles on the podcast as well. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.